So I want to talk about everything you actually get with Black Ops 7 because as we get pretty close, I think a lot of people want to kind of know what they're actually getting for their 70 bucks. Realistically, I want to kind of cover the various modes, talk about the actual content you will get, and then whether or not it's worth buying or pre-ordering. Generally, I advise against pre-ordering. Because there's not really much benefit to it, especially not like when you go into a store, you pre-order, get the physical copy. Now it's just digital, so it's not really all that big a deal. So we'll be covering what you can expect from the campaign, multiplayer, and then zombies, as well as all the DLC content that you get for free throughout the year. And a lot of the features that they're doing with Black Ops 7 to kind of respect the player's time investment, because a lot of people do sink a ton of hours into the game. And I feel like they do a pretty good job of rewarding you for that time, whether you're more of a quote unquote free to play player after you buy the game, you don't spend any additional money, or you're hardcore into the microtransaction stuff and buy all the cosmetics at your heart desire. Regardless, I'll go over what kind of is the basic content you'll be getting. And speaking of ways to save time, this video does have a sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Factor Meals, and this is a company I've worked with multiple times because I genuinely enjoy the product and have used the product multiple times, especially with the new releases of Call of Duty. I tend to grind a ton of hours and make sure I have meals stacked up so that I don't go around skipping meals, because that could be pretty bad for you, especially on my current fitness journey right now where I'm down 40 pounds, can't be missing any meals. And they made it even easier with tons more options, doubling their menu size to 80 plus options per week to fit whatever nutrition needs you have, whether it's high protein, carb conscious, keto, calorie smart, fiber filled, or GLP-1 balance. And since the menu is updated with regularity, you can go ahead and pick different things all the time and make sure that you're really never eating the same thing unless that's genuinely what you want to eat. And if you've never had a Factor meal, they're super easy. They come to you pretty much already ready made. You open them up, throw them into the microwave. After about 2.5 minutes, they come out, you let it cool, and then you're pretty much good to go. You got your meal. And this is particularly even more helpful for somebody who's only making a meal for themselves, or if you just want an alternative that's simpler and easier to do than eating out. And if you want to try it out for yourself, go ahead and head over to factor75.com, or you can click the link near the top of the description and use code JGODFB50, and this will get you 50% off your first box and free breakfast for 1 year. That's code JGODFB50 at factor75.com, again, to get 50% off plus that 1 free year of breakfast. Thank you again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back. When it comes to these different things, they've actually kind of gone out of their way to do a ton in this game that each one of these individual modes can almost be a standalone. I know that most people, or at least my general feeling has always been that majority of players play the multiplayer, and then slightly less players play the zombies, which is still a huge fan base for that. And then there's people that are kind of dedicated to the campaign, and this will be kind of like the longest campaign that we've ever had in Call of Duty history. Just for a little bit of a reference, the average COD campaign is around 6.5 hours. That's if you just kind of play through it normally on regular difficulty. Treyarch usually ends up being a little bit more on the longer end, around 7.5 hours on average, with maybe only one exception being a little bit shorter. Black Ops 7 is expected to be around that same thing for Treyarch. You're in about 7.5 hours of campaign gameplay, and that's the base standard gameplay that you're kind of used to, where you queue up for a specific mission, and this follows to the next mission, then the next mission, and the next mission, pretty linearly, with some cutscenes, some, you know, hype moments, I guess you want to call it, and then you kind of have your content related to that. But for the first time ever, they're going to also expand on this and add to what they're calling an end game content area, which realistically, from what I was told, is going to be about as long as the main campaign and probably just a little bit longer. And that is it's like a DMZ style game mode in a sense, but it's not really DMZ because it's not an extraction shooter game, or it's not an extraction based mode. But it introduces a ton of systems that are separate from your regular operator levels, weapon levels, and stuff like that. It's going to have its own system, similar to like zombies. They have augments, if you're familiar with those systems, where you'll be able to progress in that specific mode, and it has very specific things. And these are some of the things that we saw kind of in the trailer, where maybe you get access to a grapple hook, which doesn't exist in multiplayer. Maybe you get access to that super jump, which again doesn't exist in multiplayer or zombies. They have their own version of movement, which is going to be with the wall jump. That's an aside. Campaign will have that too, but campaign will lean into a bunch of other systems that are very specific to the campaign and only available within the campaign. And this is also while we'll have shared progression. This is something I'm going to bring up probably a bunch for every mode that we talk about, because I think this really is that type of thing where it does respect your time as a player. I know there's very much instances in the past where the instant I could get onto the servers, I was playing multiplayer. And the only time I ever touched campaign was basically when we got to have it early, or maybe there was an outage at some point and I was like, you know what, I'm kind of bored. Let me go ahead and try the campaign. Other than that, I had really no reason to try the campaign, especially since I'm like, well, I want to gain levels. I want to gain progression, and campaign didn't offer that. Now it will. So you don't really have to feel like you're sacrificing that time. You could just play what you want. If you don't want to play the campaign, that's cool too. For anyone that was kind of always on the fence and you felt like it wasn't that important, or you played it anyways, now you can actually benefit from it. One thing that hasn't really gotten talked about as much is it's been already kind of confirmed that there's going to be DLC content for the campaign. And this will be like another first for Call of Duty. To my knowledge, I can't recall a time when they did this, when they actually added story elements, progression, and like cutscenes and stuff that are going to expand on the story. And that's just that particular part. Obviously, we can go into more like granular details on what the mode's going to offer in terms of the leveling. And if you die, you can be reset. And there's some other elements there. The camo grind, if you're into that, that's not for everyone. But it does allow you to potentially just like reach max level in the game of 55, which we know you could prestige after that. But if you just want to reach max level, the campaign could probably provide you for that. And then when you jump over to multiplayer, you can, have everything unlocked. If you go into zombies, you'll pretty much have everything unlocked if you choose opt to not prestige and engage with those systems. So easily you're going to have around 15-ish hours, probably on the more like short side if you kind of skip cutscenes and rush through. But easily 20 plus hours if you really enjoy the experience and then you engage with it and like it. That brings us to probably the most popular mode in my opinion, is multiplayer. Maybe this has changed over the years. I know it felt like the game was leaning more towards Warzone and multiplayer kind of took a back seat, and now it's kind of back to the way it was. And I think they're doing a lot of changes that rely on player feedback, and whether it was Battlefield success that's kind of turned the needle in some of these areas, some of the things they couldn't have possibly known in advance, but other little key things that they're changing with multiplayer are huge. You're going to get the 16 base maps for 6v6. There's a couple of the bigger maps that are like a ground war style thing, not necessarily ground war, but 16. And from the beta, you already know that these maps are already bigger than what we had in Black Ops 6. The enhanced Omni movement, the changes to the perks, which they already put out some details saying, hey, we're looking to change some of the stuff based off player feedback from the beta, that they're going to implement those. On top of that, and the 30 base weapons that the game's going to come with, you're going to get all the maps and weapons and pretty much all post-launch content for free. Usually you're going to get around 20 to 30 6v6 maps throughout the year. That's going to be included. When that's whether or not you buy the game as a pre-order, day one, or 6 months into the game's life cycle, you're going to have access to all of that content. And then you get the 30 or 40 weapons that are released throughout the year, essentially doubling the availability of weapons. And like I said earlier, you're going to be able to get all the way to level 55, get access to all the content, essentially. Everything else after that is what we would call peacocking, where it's basically just stuff to show off that you play the game a bunch, or you do specific challenges, whether it's 100% your calling card, whether it's specific prestige camos or weapon prestige or number prestige, level 1000 mastery. You could just kind of go on and on about all the peacocking that COD allows. But if you're someone that doesn't really get into that, and you just kind of enjoy the gameplay loop of getting into matches quickly, understanding the maps and the spawns are kind of predictable on what you can expect to get from them, that there's a little bit of a controlled chaos that is added with Call of Duty and streaks, and that like frenetic gameplay that they always talk about, that's kind of tied to COD. and you really can't get anywhere else. Even in the quote unquote like slower, not necessarily hectic CODs, you still had those things. It still has that core component that is Call of Duty, which comes back to that gameplay element that really no other game can replicate. And they kind of really stay in their lane when it comes to that. And love it or hate it, that's kind of the core feature of Call of Duty, to have those types of things. Again, shared progress across the campaign, multiplayer, and zombies. I know this always gets mixed up, but you are not obligated or required to buy any battle passes for any of the weapons. They are completely optional for a bunch of cosmetic stuff, which mostly is kind of a waste. I think battle passes over the years have kind of gotten to be a waste, so I don't even really encourage people buying those that often. We are getting that reduced matchmaking. That's going to be the default for the entirety of the game. It's not like the beta where there's split modes. I think they're going to do some other things that they haven't announced yet that I've heard of, kind of like on the side, that I think could be improved even upon those. I think persistent lobbies being back is going to be another huge one, where you could form those rivalries, go head to head with other players, talk your smack if you want, if you're one of those trash talkers, a lot of those in COD. Because right now it's like, yeah, bro, I smoked you. Disbanding lobby. It's like, oh, they didn't even get a reply. Or vice versa. I didn't even get a reply. It's kind of one of those things. And then I believe they also made some announcements about some aim assist tuning to further expand on some of the tuning they did last year, which I think was a huge shift. And that was a huge benefit, especially up close. They modified the way aim assist works. And I think they'll continue to do this to kind of balance out the inputs, as well as, you know, not necessarily making the game aim for you as much. I think they'll get into some of that. One thing that is especially nice about even all these weapons and stuff like that, the leveling in COD is significantly faster than especially what we've seen in Battlefield. And I think one of the best parts about COD is leveling your gun necessarily isn't the content. It's like the gameplay, the maps, the weapons, just in general, and being able to utilize all those things as much as little as you want without having to have a part-time job as a Call of Duty player to unlock everything. I think that's kind of a detriment to players. Obviously, there's an aspect of things you can earn, but I'm really more about earning things that you would consider peacocking and not like core elements of the game just being gatekept. And I think COD's kind of done a better job on that. And from the people I talked to when we went to COD Next and things like that, the leveling, regardless of the actual level number required for the weapons, it should be slightly faster. So that's all that type of content. Pretty cool stuff. But again, if you're not a COD fan, then it's fine. There's lots of games out there right now. I'm excited for Arc Raiders that's coming out very soon. You got the Battle Royale, if you're into that, for Battlefield. You got Warzone, supposed to have their update, which I'm not too interested in, but maybe you are. And then they got kind of other games going on too, outside of the first-person genre, third-person genre, in terms of that. And then that gets us to Zombies, which is going to be probably one of the biggest, most robust Zombies launches. I could say that even considering that we got 2 maps last year, I feel like Liberty Falls was a little bit small and a little bit more of like an intro map that led to its kind of like popularity, ease of use, camo grind, whatever you want to call it. Versus Terminus was a completely different vibe. They're going to launch with Ashes of the Dam, which is going to be a huge, like the largest round-based map we've ever had. We did get a sample a little portion of that when we went to COD Next. I think that's huge to be able to have a large map. And then on top of that, you're going to have the survival maps, which are like a little more small, simple, high round, casual play type things. And then you have this curse mode, which I think a lot of people are really referring to that as classic. I think that's a little bit more of a misnomer. It's not necessarily a classic mode. It's just a new mode designed a little bit more for challenge oriented players that are a little bit more skilled or want to challenge themselves in a specific way, with its own progression and gameplay loop that'll be slightly different than what we're seeing in survival or the round based stuff. And then on top of that, just for fun, they're adding in Dead Ops Arcade, and this is in every odd version of Black Ops. So this is Black Ops 1, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 5, and then now Black Ops 7. Black Ops 5 was Cold War. All of those had the Dead Ops arcade, so this is just number 4 in that series. And this is just another way for your progression to carry over count, and they're going to have 4 different modes of that too. So it's tons. If you actually enjoy zombies, there's tons to get lost in. And then the ongoing support is we're going to have 5 full like maps that are coming out with full main Easter egg quests throughout the year for all the seasons. They're going to have those intro cutscenes, all that stuff to add to the story elements and story beats that we didn't get in Black Ops 6. All the weapon progression that we talked about before, the 30 to 40 weapons that are added, that's all for free. And the new perks, upgrades, field upgrades, systems that they also add throughout the year, on top of basically all the systems we already had in Black Ops 6, is all completely free. All of that content. So you buy the game, you get access to these content drops. And even if you don't like think that, hey, I want to no life the game, if you want to come back for when these maps launch, maybe experiment with those, have a little bit of fun, and then maybe when GTA comes out, you decide to go jump onto that. That's cool. You at least got a game for 6 to 8 months. And the really only concern that I've seen raised about zombies is the HUD or UI. We've seen some leak things where you're going to be able to unlock super customizable throwback UI from previous zombies games, which would be kind of cool. And I think they've done a bunch of different changes that are kind of like not as, you know, prominent. Is they modified some of the pacing things so that the gameplay should be a little bit smoother and faster, with a little bit more challenge to a certain extent with the core zombies experience. I think the changes to the rampage inducer will allow more people to engage with it, so you can actually kill more zombies in a shorter amount of time. Whether you're just trying to go for higher rounds, maybe you want to do a specific challenge, or maybe you want to do camos or level weapons or whatever the case is, you're going to have all of those types of things. And because of carryover and expanding of the augment system, I think a lot of things are just going to feel a little bit more powerful. And there's usually a power dynamic that you want to achieve in these types of games. And I think they're doing a lot of things to do that. But at the end of the day, whether or not you should buy the game, pre-order the game, or buy it when it goes on sale is going to be completely up to you, your budget, and what you play Call of Duty for. Personally, I'm going to engage with pretty much everything except for probably Dead Ops Arcade. That's being just honest. I wasn't a fan of it previously, but that's okay. I still get like 20 plus hours in the campaign, especially if I'm going to go for the camo stuff, which I know is not for everybody. Multiplayer, probably do that second or third after I do the zombies Easter egg on day 1. And then I do some camos and leveling over there. And then, you know, I'll probably get like 20 to 30 hours minimum on zombies, and then I'll do another 30 hours in multiplayer, and that's just the launch window. After that, with the DLC drops and the other content things, and then coverage as a content creator, those numbers will shoot up a lot. So I'm at least doing 80 to 100 hours. That's just launch window out the gate. So for me, 100% worth it. I'd be dumb not to get the game, but I understand that not everyone plays the campaign. Not everyone plays multiplayer. Not everyone plays zombies. And not everyone even likes Call of Duty. And that's okay. If you don't like Call of Duty, you know what you're getting with Call of Duty. They do significantly more every year than like a 2K or a Madden. Those, as far as I'm aware, just mainly roster updates with maybe, you know, some extra celebrations thrown in the mix. Call of Duty does significantly more than that. But regardless, if you don't like COD and the gameplay loop, then you're probably not going to like Black Ops 7, right? If you are a fan of COD and you like the content that we're going to have with all these different events and seasonal stuff and whatever, the game's going to be supported for the next, you know, 10 months or so, and then you jump off to GTA. So that's kind of everything that's going to be in Black Ops 7. There's obviously going to be more with microtransactions, which I don't really care for or not a fan of. I don't really invest my money there because I buy my game and then that should cover me for me to play the game. And from what we've seen from leaks and other details, they actually cut a lot of collaborations planned for this upcoming year because of the feedback of the too cartoony, losing its identity. Obviously, there's going to be some outliers, but I'm not really too concerned with that. It's probably like the biggest like content package COD has ever put out in terms of like actually looking at each of those individual modes and kind of what they add to each other, with the shared progression, with prestige, weapon prestige, all this other content in terms of maps, weapons, loadouts. Like literally there's something pretty much for everyone, unless you just simply do not like COD. This is really gives me that, like, the amount of content they were pumping out during like Black Ops 3 is kind of a huge contender for that, but I think this will still be a little bit more than that. So regardless if you get it or not, appreciate you watching the video. I will have content on each of these various modes as we get closer to launch. See you on the next one. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.